Welcome to Medicine Redefined, a podcast focusing on helping you reclaim ownership of your health. I'm Dr. Darsha.
And I'm Dr. Altamash Raja. We're your hosts, here to challenge conventional practices and uncover the stories behind pioneers shaping the future of medicine. Our conversations not only focus on the individual level to dissect common practices for health optimization, but also zoom out to enhance systemic change.
Join us as we look to break the status quo, move the needle forward, and put the health back in healthcare. Hi everyone, in this episode, we're going to be touching on a couple different topics. First, we will be touching on the 2025 health trends that we think are here to stay, are ready to leave, and we'll even go into what we think is overhyped. But before that, we got to see if we were right about 2024, what we predicted last year. After that segment, we'll transition into myself interviewing Dr. Raja about a recent surgery that he went through. And he's going to take us through some of the things that he's learned, the research he's looked at, how he could have prepped better before going into surgery, and what he's doing actively to recover from it. This is a highly actionable episode, and highly recommend sharing it to anyone that you know that is currently going through surgery or maybe has one coming up. Enjoy. Welcome back, everyone. This is our first live episode 2025. So happy new year to all the listeners out there. Hope you got to share the highlights of 2024, let go of the demons, and are able to create a better version of yourself here in 2025 alongside Dr. Altamash Raja and myself. Alt, how you doing?
Good. I'm not sure if I let my demons go, but otherwise pretty good. I like that. I like that opening.
Yeah. Cool. So this episode, we'll go through some trends like we did last year. But before we talk about 2025 trends and what we think is up and coming and might be the biggest winners and losers, let's go through what we predicted in 2024 and see how that panned out. So if people want to check out that episode, it's probably, I think it was done the first week of February in 2024. And we essentially just asked each other, hey, what trends do we foresee and what fads do we foresee? So we kind of took turns here. And the first thing you said was digital health. We had a guest on at that time too, talking about digital. We had multiple guests actually come on and talk about digital health. But what do you think? How do you think you did there in terms of digital health in 2024?
Yeah, change takes time. If I had to double down on it, I still would today. I think that is still going to continue to. In fact, I think later, probably when we talk about what's going to happen, I'll probably have some variation of that. I think it's important for people to go back. I figure, oh my God, you did the solo interview for digital health with RJ.
Yes, RJ Kedziora. Yes.
Yeah, Kedziora, right? It's exactly what digital health is, not just kind of only from the aspect of telehealth, but I think especially as we talk about our last discussion between you and I in terms of the insurance-based model and what everything happened with United Healthcare and insurances and the transparency that now that's becoming more evident for everybody. I think that consumer mindset of medicine being transactional, much like many other things in this capitalist society, is going to become more rampant. And that's where I think digital health really goes up. And those companies like 8 Sleep is one which is now considered a medical device by many things, right? We talked about TrueMed and how you can get your FSA for 8 Sleep. And so that qualifies into that. And then the integration of that into the traditional medical model in terms of hospitals and clinics, that'll take a very long time. I do not think that a year from now we'll have this conversation. In fact, I can guarantee that there's no way I'm going to be a year from now and say, oh yeah. Because we're still using fax, old school fax to get records from outside institutions. So that'll take a very long time.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this year there's definitely been more talk about the integration of AI in terms of health. And obviously that's going to continue to grow. So cool. For me, I said in 2024 that recovery rooms, especially bathhouses, would be a trend. And so as I look back on that, what's been interesting is I've seen people take that into their own hands. So rather than recovery rooms popping up, which they are now, actually being in Tampa, I just spoke to somebody that just opened up a recovery room with infrared sauna, compression, ice plunges, all of that. And there's another one actually right down the street from me that just opened up as well. I think people, at least in like New York City and even here in St. Pete, they would throw their own parties with saunas and ice plunges at coffee shops. And it was just a good way of networking, getting to know people that are like-minded. So that I definitely saw a big increase in. So
Interesting. You did say that you were going to start up your own bathhouse, though.
I did.
How's that
I remember
coming
hearing
along?
that. It's getting there. Just still looking for some land. I guess I got beat to
Yeah.
it, but
Yeah.
awesome. What else do we say here? So, okay, this one's good, actually. You said actionability from health wearables. So you thought there would be at least more of a report or more actionable tips that we see from maybe companies like Apple, Boop, Eat Sleep, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I haven't seen much on that in there. I think there's been so much excitement with health tech and not health tech in terms of AI in health care. And I feel like all the people who were more in health tech have been focusing on how we can incorporate AI and incorporate and just be better and more thoughtful in terms of how we calculate data. But it hasn't been more actionable in the sense of practical implications for that. I suppose that's a trend, right? So you're going a certain way and all of a sudden a new technology just has been around for a long time, but it's really taken off, exponential rise in terms of usage, and people are like, how do we adapt this? We were just talking about this with our team yesterday. So I'm not really sure how I've seen that. Like my Apple Watch hasn't changed. In fact, if anything, it's regressed in terms of the data that it gives me from actionability. Like it's so hard for me to look at my weekly summary. I don't even know if it's possible for me to look at my weekly summary for how many steps I've taken, which is really annoying. But at the same time, we were talking about, you sent me that thing with Mark Cuban. We know that cryptocurrency is something that's been really big. I know I'm making a very hard left turn here, but Apple's like making their own tokens for that stuff. So interesting how different large, big companies see these phase shifts in terms of what the people want, what consumers want, and they start putting more efforts to what that it's supply and demand. Economics 101, I suppose that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I follow this guy, Adam.datadriven on Instagram. I think he's like an MIT grad or something. He talks about the newest health tech innovations and trends and stuff that's going on. And I think maybe last month he mentioned exactly this actionability from health wearables. I think this is what all the companies are starting to get now from an AI perspective and now actually shoot out like, hey, this is what you should do in the morning. This is what you should do. So like hyper optimization essentially, and then tracking the certain variables that would affect that, whether it's HRV or heart rate or, stress levels or whatever. I don't know if it's subjective or something that's going to be coming. So
I don't know how I feel about that though, man. Like when life becomes so prescriptive, it's not life anymore. Like you're not living. If I have to have my health tech tell me how to function or how to breathe or when to take a sip of water or when to go to the bathroom, I'm not really sure how.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's crazy though, is I think in like, when we look like 300-400 years from now, I mean, we're all going to be robotic essentially, we're all it's going to be like an episode of Wall-E in the sense of we're all just kind of like Optimus Prime. We are going to be AI ourselves in a way. And,
I mean, Brian Johnson's been doing this, right? This is what he does. Like, I think when you watch, like, you listen to him and stuff, it's fascinating, the one-man experiment that he's running, or I guess he's running it with his son, too.
Yeah, his son's doing some of it as well. Yeah, there's a documentary that came out on him, actually, Don't Die.
Yeah, Netflix. Right. I caught bits and pieces of that, and it's like look, everywhere that I hear him, the guy says, I want to do this, and I'm happy.
I love it.
It's certainly, and by all means, like if that brings you joy and that brings you reward, like that's by all, go for it. But I don't know. I mean, I go back and forth about this thing for a long time. There was a study that I was coming across. There's another guy, I can't think of this. He's a really prominent person who shares evidence-based fitness and health information. And this study that he shared today, I'll send it to you on Instagram, where he talked about sleep regularity is far more important for all-cause mortality than sleep quantity. Like we know that 7 to 9, ideally average 8 hours of quality sleep is important. But like Dr. Matthew Walker talks about QQRT, right? Quality, quantity, regularity. Like going to the bed the same time every single night and waking up roughly in the same, like within a 30-minute window, that actually shows to have even a more significant impact on all-cause mortality. So I was looking at this and I was like, oh crap. Like and the reason I bring that up is because like social jet lag, the concept of that for those people who are not familiar with it, let's say you're going to bed at 10 o'clock during the weeknights, but then on the weekends, like you're out with your family and you're spending some quality time and you stay up till 12 at midnight. I always get super stressed about that. And one, I am a morning bird, right? And so I want everybody to get up at 5:30 and hang out, but that's not the society we live in. Everybody in my family, my siblings, they want to stay up later. And so with the holidays just right behind us, I was privileged and blessed enough to spend some quality time with my family. but they all wanted to hang out late. Like every time I just passed out on the couch, like I just can't hang. But, what I tried to remind myself is not to stress out about the fact that my sleep is off, quote unquote.
Right.
Like that time with family is just irreplaceable. You know what I mean? And so,
Yeah.
so I'm always like back and forth about this. Like I understand what the data says, I understand what the science says, but sometimes violating it isn't the end of the world because, again, as we said before, like physiology is complex and human beings are complex, and it's a one-to-one person thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Fair enough.
Let's see here. Okay, I guess the last thing I said was I thought there would be more traffic into DEXA/VO2 max clinics. And I think we talked about there's a DEXA Fit in Philly. There's some around here that are clinics that measure your bone density, and through that data, or muscle mass as well. And through that data, Peter T is a big fan of this. You can look at whether you're overnourished, undernourished, whether you need to do weightlifting. You can kind of set your own protocol up for that. And then also looking at VO2 max. I see more and more gyms now offering VO2 max services where you can actually, put the respiratory device on, go on a treadmill and see what that is. Yeah, I think it was a little bit more of a trend than I see something that's more stable. I know more people are talking about it, but I don't think more people are getting it tested, essentially.
I've been twice, so I can tell you, you're right.
All right.
You're right about me. So
there we go.
and 2 DEXA for DEXA Fit. Interesting about that. I actually, when we later talk about muscle loss after disuse or disuse atrophy, particularly getting the annual DEXA scan was a thing. I think I'm going to make it a bit more frequent now just because I've lost quite a bit of muscle mass that we'll talk about later. That I'm curious because the first time I ended up getting it was this place in Philadelphia. Second time I was out in Orange County, California, and I got it. And it's not supposed to be like, you ideally want to use the same system and all that kind of stuff in the same tech. But the experience was night and day in terms of, for the first technician, how we sat down and talked about the body composition, what that meant and stuff. It was just like the first time tech was like, all right, here's your results. Okay, it'll be in your portal. And the second time, I think she was like a master's level exercise science technician. And she was like, oh, do you know what this means? This is what this means. These are the implications of this. This is how you might consider this. And I was like, man, this experience is also, the second one was far cheaper. So I wish that place could be closer to me. I think maybe now we can start talking about the next thing. That's going to continue to increase. What I had talked about earlier in terms of people taking health into their own hands, seeing some of the nonsensical stuff that's happening with insurance companies, that compiled with the fact that all these anorectic drugs are great for weight loss, they are slashing down lean body mass.
Right.
That's happening. I'm seeing this in my patients. And I've prescribed it a couple of times too. And I'm recommending body composition beforehand. Can everybody afford a DEXA scan, which could be in the neighborhood of $150, $200, maybe a little bit more? Yeah. No, but some type of body composition has to be done. And if you're not tracking body composition and you're starting anorectic, that's bad news bears. Or if you're prescribing an anorectic and you're not encouraging your patients to start or get body recompositions, then that's not good practice either.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. Let's get into the 2025 trends here. So we'll break this into categories. So first up, the biggest winner that you think of 2025. And this can be a person, idea, concept, whatever.
It's so easy. It's so easy to stay on the health trend, right? Because that's just, we're so inundated with that day in and day out. Oh man, Trump is the biggest winner of 2024. I like I actually didn't know I was going to say that until 2 microseconds ago. I don't think anybody saw him winning, or at least I don't remember people talking about. In fact, like even people within the own Republican Party. I think I was watching this interview with Bill Maher the other day. It was, oh yeah, he's going to lose. He's absolutely going to lose. And I think this was from maybe October or some point. So I think everybody, including the Republican Party, just thought that was going to be it, and they were preparing for that. And so that was surprising because not only did he win, he won by a landslide, and very strategic, right? So no matter what your thoughts are about this individual, brilliant individual to run the campaign in the manner that he ran, recruiting the teammates and getting people on his side as opposed to having opposition, I think was awesome. So I can't believe we went there in terms of political. Hopefully we haven't lost half our audience at this point, but I think that was interesting.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. My biggest winner is the concept of truth. And I was going to say RFK, but I think it all ties in. Donald Trump, RFK, the truth. And I think obviously the American people, you and I, we're all looking for the government to come out earlier and admit mistakes, but also bring out the data that they probably already have and that they just haven't released. And that could be in regards to vaccines. It can be in regards to wars. It can be in regards to whatever people have issues with or whatever the country is going through. And I know they've pledged to at least bring out some lists and go through some documents, open up some things as well, open the vault, so to speak. So we'll see how that happens in 2025. I mean, Trump is getting, I think when we release this, actually, I don't know when we're going to release this, but he's probably going to be inaugurated by then. But yeah.
Yeah. And when you say the truth, I think, again, Mark Cuban was talking about this, how one of the biggest reasons, I shouldn't say maybe biggest, but a large portion of the young male population, right? Maybe not middle age, but young male population had, and the Democratic Party lost that vote. And maybe not just male, but also just younger, like 20s and early 30s, and maybe even younger than that, 18-year-old. It's because of those things that we talked about, right? Like transparency. Same thing with the crypto idea. There's so much transparency with crypto, which is something, this is a reason that it's favorable, because you can see the entire transaction of something that's been there, like where Bitcoin, Ethereum, or whatever it might be. Whereas you have no idea what's happening with stocks and index funds, like what those stocks are. And that I think it really adds to that. So yeah, fascinating.
Love it. Next one up, the biggest loser that you think of 2025, or will be the biggest loser.
I'm going to stay on this. I think the traditional, the old school fee for service models in healthcare, again, this is going to take time. And maybe this is recency bias. It probably is recency bias. Like the method of going to insurance companies and not being able to advocate for it and just paying when you're told like you're going to pay this. Look, there are people who are not going to be in a position who are not going to be knowledgeable enough, aren't going to be driven enough to be able to advocate for themselves. But if you look at even poverty, everybody has a cell phone. And now information, even though we're inundated with it on social media, there is good quality information and it spreads pretty quickly. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever you have. And if the whole Brian Thompson thing and then the people's responses on social media is any indication of how people actually feel, like you talk about people celebrating a win of justice being served, not necessarily somebody getting murdered, I think they're going to be more inclined to question why something is the way that it is. Believe it or not, I have a side business where I see patients. I've had people calling back and be like, hey, listen, I can't pay for this and stuff like that. And you don't really have a choice, but you're like, okay, fine. Yeah, you don't have to worry about paying it. Stuff like that. I don't know if you knew that, by the way. You can just like, yeah. So I don't encourage anybody to do this because medical bills is the number one reason for bankruptcy in America, as far as I know, unless that data has changed recently. But you can oftentimes not pay these medical bills when you have predatory billing practices happen and you are so incredibly protected. Or you can get bills like drastically reduced if you just say, hey, listen, I can't afford this, or write a letter. And they're doing that. And that's one of the reasons actually they're marking up these bills like drastically.
They know,
so yeah, I think that's going to be a big loser.
So yeah, Mark Cuban actually talked about that, how they drive the costs up to make more and quote unquote subsidize the entire market for health insurance. So interesting.
Yeah. Look, I'm giving you 800% discount.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Crazy. So it's funny. I swear to the audience, we did not collaborate on this beforehand, but my biggest loser was insurance companies. I just think the death of Brian Thompson make insurance companies shake it in their boots a little bit, and obviously we saw Anthem try to pull a fast one by putting time limits on surgeries and remote. And so I think they're going to be take their time to make any more policy. I think there's going to be an uprise of people that talk about these things when fraud happens, when there's injustice with healthcare. I think more and more people are going to be talking about it. Social media is going to be more aware now too. And I think the whole event of Brian Thompson has really just permeated through social media, these different topics. And then you have people like Marty McCary writing books on this topic, essentially, with different just types of corruption within healthcare. So I'll put that as my biggest loser of 2025. Awesome.
Yes, sir.
All right. Next one, most overhyped trend, let's say, in 2025. What do you think, if you have one?
Why don't you go first? Let me think on this a little bit.
Okay. I'm going to say all-in-one wearables. So, the whole talk about optimizing everything from wearing a watch that can track your sleep, tell you your HRV, tell you how to work out, track your calories. I think there's companies out there and maybe some that are already known, like Apple and things that are trying to do this. I just don't think it's going to be productive enough. And I already like, for instance, we've talked about this where I've used Whoop, you've used trackers too before, and just like after a while, you tend to get more stress from it, or you already gain the knowledge you need and you don't want to be robotic. And so I think it's going to take a long, long time before these wearables can actually do something helpful. But I think there's going to be heavy marketing around it. And I just don't helpful.
I agree with you, but I think I have a slightly different reasoning of why I think it's gonna maybe could be biggest loser or in the most overhyped. When you try to do multiple things and you end up not being good at any one thing. So for instance, Oura Ring is really just calculating sleep and it's predicting HRV from that. And so from a sleep standpoint, it's actually very good. The Apple Watch is trying to do multiple things and it's not highly accurate or precise in any one of those. And considering everything we've talked about thus far and how people are going to become more data driven, I think they're going to want the best data. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to go for one thing that's going to point them in the general direction, which actually might be a better idea, because if something like an Apple Watch can point you in the direction, but maybe not be as precise as maybe a combination of a Whoop and an Aura and a Morpheus, that. But that's multiple things, right? That's to your point. It's before you know it, you have a gadget on every single finger, and I'm not interested in that. So I think that's actually one of the reasons why but I agree with you.
No, I agree there, right? Because if you can take the data and go to a physician, if you're going with inaccurate data or something that the physician can't really trust, it's pointless if it comes down to true health. Whereas I feel comfortable taking my Eat Sleep data, let's say, and going to like a PCP and being, hey, this is what is going on, because I trust it. So, good point. Okay. Do you have anything in as far as overhyped?
No, I'm just going to piggyback off yours.
Okay. All right. I like it. No worries. All right. Next up, we have breakthrough technology 2025. What do you think is going to be the next tech?
This is so easy. And again, it's recency bias, but I think AI and machine learning in every facet of what we do, particularly in medicine. That's the one that affects us the most. But you and I, we talk about this daily, how we're just so incredibly impressed with all types of AI, how it's, dare I say, revolutionized how I even just approach any and every problem. And it continues to get better and better. I don't think I know the limitation at this point. Is just how I can incorporate and use it. And the rate of the development is overwhelming.
Well, let me ask you that. What do you think what do you think that like breakthrough is going to be though? Like, what's the next thing that you like? So 2024, I think, was a breakthrough for OpenAI and stuff. What's the next level that you think?
I think true integration into health. So for instance, open evidence is a really good one. I think you had sent that to me, but a couple other students have shared that with me. Open evidence is an AI-based model for research and for almost like an admin person you can use to help build communication with insurance companies. If you have to have medical necessity letters, create plans for you and that kind of stuff. If you're a healthcare provider, it's free. Now, I remember one of my previous attendings and a friend told me, like, I forget what the thing is. It's actually built into Epic. So it's AI-based Scribe. It's Journey or Dream or something like that.
I don't know if it's Dragon. I use Dragon.
No, Dragon is a dictation software, right?
Yeah. But it also has, so Dragon, what they're doing now is you dictate, it'll take your progress note, get the highlight keywords and be like, hey, chronicity, add acuity. So it'll tell you like what you're missing to like make your billing even higher, which is interesting.
Oh, I need that upgrade. I don't have that. Yeah. But he was talking about, you'll go into the room, you'll click on the patient's chart and the HiQ app, which is just an app that you have for the EMR, and you'll just leave it. You'll let the patient know, hey, this conversation is being recorded by AI and it's going to help. It's going to function as your scribe. He tells me by the time he walks out of the room and he gets to his computer 20 feet away, the entire note is written better than any note that he could write. And a little tongue in cheek there, but in the sense that like to be able to calculate or capture all that data and put it down would take you so much time. And so the AI model is trained well enough to understand, hey, these facts coming out from the patient's mouth are critical because they're going to help billing, right? So sometimes people have this misconception. They don't understand really how billing works, right? You know, generally in the traditional model, you can do like time-based billing, which is very simple. How much time did you spend doing certain things, not just with the patient? People think that like they see something as a level 4. It's like you spend 35 minutes. There's no way doctors spend 35 minutes with me. No, it's a bunch of things that you have to do. Like they could have spent looking at your chart for 30 minutes and talked to you for one. They could bill for 31 minutes. But I digress. The other thing is in terms of like problems and chronicity, in terms of complications and things they talked about. And those are all the things that it'll capture. And the example that he was giving, a patient said, oh, I've taken Tylenol in the past, but currently I take some anti-inflammatory like celecoxib, but sometimes that irritates my stomach. The AI was able to discern that, hey, this isn't potential adverse effects. And the doctor did mention, okay, you want to stay away from that because it's going to also hurt your kidneys. Something in passing that I say 100 times every single time we talk about NSAIDs, I almost never document it because it's just one of those things, but the AI won't miss it. And that's just, now you're talking about a complex decision making. It can help upbill. And so I think this is where hospital and healthcare-based systems, they have to invest in that. And I do think they will continue to do that.
Yeah.
Because it's about the bottom dollar. And it helps up their billing.
I mean, how often are we just sitting in front of the computer typing, trying to think about what else can you add to prove medical decision making? Right? I mean, making your visit. And that's the struggle of half the stuff, right? Of doctors, of what we do. So yeah, I totally agree. I think that's going to be something that it's going to be a time saver and it's going to be awesome. So awesome. Oh, my breakthrough technology. So I think virtual reality workouts. There's this new company that I found called Sandbox that's here in St. Pete. Now it's virtual reality gaming. Actually go into like this big room. They hook up like an Oculus sensors on your arms, feet, and you can play like a multiplayer game. I think, and this is, there's probably a 5% chance it's actually going to be a breakthrough tech, but I think virtual reality for workouts is going to be the next thing too. We're already seeing group classes. We're seeing all these things. As virtual reality starts to improve, I think they're going to go into the fitness industry.
I like that.
Two more here. One is comeback trend. What is a trend that we have maybe lost that will come back in 2025?
I think if it's already started to, it's just walking. Good old walking for exercise, getting your steps in. I know there are some people, some prominent figures in the health and wellness industry who are talking about, oh, walking is not really true exercise. Aside from that one person that we're thinking about, people are, again, on the train of being more active participants in your care and being healthy and tracking your stuff. I think just good old walking as activity. Again, I'm also going back to the fact that, okay, that's something that's going to help preserve your muscle mass. And you're not going to be doing cardio to lose weight and lose muscle because now we're taking all these anorectic drugs. A lot of people are, whether for better or for worse. Walking is something that just for exercise and then start coming back.
Nice. Okay. Mine. What age did you get your first cell phone?
Oh, I know where you're going with this. 15, maybe?
Okay. Yeah, I think I was 13, 8th grade. So -5. Yeah, I think I was 13 when I got mine. So my thing is, I think we're going to see a return in delaying giving kids cell phones. So I was looking at the data. Right now, the average kid is about 11 years old before they get their first cell phone. And it actually has been like that since about 2010, 2012. Maybe 2005 is kind of when we saw maybe 13 years old or so. But there's like campaigns out there called Wait Until 8. So you want to delay giving your cell phone up until 8th grade. And obviously, I'm sure the audience get in for why, right? We look at the mental health benefit that kids are going through, bullying, ADHD, just all these things that suck out their attention and don't let them interact with the quote unquote real world. So I think now with this new generation of parenting, there's going to be, I think I'm going to throw this out there. This year will be, instead of 11, maybe we'll see 11.2 or 11.5, but we're going to uptick in the age as far as the age of the first cell phone.
Yeah, I've heard this actually. I've also heard that a lot of the younger generation, they're going back to Blackberries and they're going back to flip phones and getting away from smartphones.
What's interesting? So I've heard the same thing about even kids being like, oh, I don't want a cell phone. I'll wait. And I'm like, which kids are saying that? Like,
I don't know these kids.
I was like, right. So I don't know, but I think
steals my phone or my wife's phone every chance she gets. So I don't. She's 3, so she's definitely not waiting until. No, she will. Nobody's getting her own phone, but I don't know what kids we're talking about here.
Yeah. But I think parents are more aware now, and I just think they're gonna, make that decision to make it later. Of course, there's always the issue of, well, my kid needs, if after school they need to call me or do this, or. But the thing is, everyone's got a cell phone now, or everyone in school is using iPads and things like that. Like, I don't think safety is as much of an issue, again, as it used to be. So I still think we live in a safer world now, although it may not seem it with the news and everything.
I do agree. I've given this some thought, obviously, right? This is a conversation that we're seriously going to be having in my household in the next couple of years. And there are ways around that in terms of safety. Yeah, sure. There's lots of phones that you can get that can make outgoing calls, or the biggest part is not to have the internet in your pocket accessible. I mean, where you can really get access to anything and everything. And so you have the pros, but the concerning part is the harms, right? Who was it that was on the author, I think Anna Lemke, who talked about Dopamine Nation, and she was talking about just addiction. And we talked about ADHD, or you mentioned ADHD, but I know you're also implying in terms of how do you tease out what's true pathology versus students just getting distracted.
Right.
It's an addictive device. We talk about just, I get stuck on TikTok all the time, or Instagram Reels all the time. So yeah, not having the internet in their pocket and the world at their disposal in that regard, I think that's the big thing that we want to stay away from.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. Last one here before we switch topics. New trend of 2025.
Oh, you go first.
So did you recently see the CDC come out with that alcohol guideline and the risk of cancer?
No, tell me.
Oh, okay. So they put a really good 7-page infographic out there talking about the risk of alcohol and its association with cancer, and really just broke down the 7 types of alcohol or 7 types of cancer that you're likely to get with alcohol. And then it broke down women's risk versus men's risk and just a whole bunch of things. And so a lot of people are now starting to share that on social media. And it was honestly a pretty good quote unquote scare tactic. It's the perfect timing, right? Because a lot of people are trying to do dry January, myself included. I'm actually cutting back a lot of alcohol this month. So the new trend that I think that's going to happen is we're going to see a really big intake of altered state inducing drinks. So things like kava, things like lion's mane, mushroom teas. I know there's nootropics coming out, like a big push to change dopamine states, acetylcholine, all those things that can act on the brain to kind of just put you in a different brain state. And so I think alcohol could also be a big loser of 2025. And I think we're going to see an uptick of companies as well as users using these types of drinks.
Yeah, I actually it's funny that you mentioned that. I had a patient recently tell me about the Surgeon General talking about this, how it increases cancer. And she was shocked. And I was like, yeah, that's actually true. There is a correlation that increases, but trying to tease out causation and the pros that you and I have talked about in terms of what that might do for somebody in terms of social lubrication and connection, et cetera, et cetera. I've thought of something actually. This could have gone into Biggest Loser too, but I think old-fashioned pain management in terms of specifically opioid prescription medications, we've been backpedaling because of the opioid crisis for the last 15 years or so, and the rules are very strict. So people who are not quote unquote experts will defer from prescribing long-term opioid use. But I think what's turning up more now are alternative ways or substances to help manage pain. We recently had a discussion about psilocybin on here, right? That's role in pain. In the very near future, we're going to be talking about ketamine and its role in some mental health disorders and mood disorders, depression. But ketamine is also a very potent analgesic, right? So from pain relief from that regard. The amazing research that's starting to come out for these substances, for even marijuana and CBD for pain relief, given everything we've talked about in terms of insurances, people's distrust of the medical system, synthetic compounds, appeal to nature fallacy, I think the opiate market is going to continue to go down, and probably for better.
Yeah, I totally agree that. I mean, pharmacies call me now if I give anything more than 3 days, and they're like, "Hey, what's going on here?" And I have to authorize it and say this is what it's for and this is why.
It's interesting, really.
Yeah, I get calls. We're only allowed to give a 3-day supply. I don't know if that's Florida rule or not, or if there has to be
probably is. Yeah, in New Jersey, it's a 5-day supply you can give before you do like a formal agreement and stuff.
Gotcha. Okay. I totally agree with that.
That's awesome. That's pretty strict. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that was pretty exhaustive. That was good. I just encourage the listeners, if you're at this point with us, when we get those reels out on Instagram and you have thoughts about your own perspectives, feel free to comment, let us know what you agree with, disagree with, or even your own thoughts. So love to engage with you and kind of predict 2025. I think this is fun for everyone. So cool. All right. Let's take a left turn here and talk about post-surgical recovery, a story of yours, and how you're doing overall. So tell the listeners a little bit about the recent surgery you went through, and maybe let's go. I can't even talk back in time and talk about the symptoms you are having and the problems you're having.
Yeah, I was thinking about this today. I'm tomorrow, 8 months post-op from hip arthroscopy, femoral chondral osteoplasty. And what that means is I had a little bit of bony overgrowth. So we shaved that down, repaired the labrum, which is cartilage deep in the hip socket, gives it a little bit more seal, suction, stability, that kind of stuff. And this is a very common thing. Femoroacetabular impingement is the main term for it. Something 20 years ago was like, oh, this is an incredibly rare thing, but now it's incredibly common. The thing with hip arthroscopy is that with respect to orthopedic surgical procedures, it's still in like the toddlerhood. Like knee arthroscopy, shoulder arthroscopy, we've been doing that for a long time. The techniques are pretty revised and people are really good at that. Hip arthroscopists are few and far between good ones. And it's a very technical procedure. It's a very advanced procedure. And I got multiple opinions and ended up going to New York City to see this guy who I think is world class. And yeah, the stuff that I was having, your pain, particularly with deep hip flexion. So if you're, and with loading stuff. So maybe sitting for prolonged periods of time. But where it really bothered me was squatting, right? Deep lunges, really bilateral squatting seems to bother me too. I had these symptoms since 2016. At that time, a surgeon told me, hey, listen, kick this can down the road as far as you can, because hip arthroscopy is not where you want it to be right now. Unfortunately, my labrum got shredded to a point where it just didn't have any options. And I was having what we call mechanical symptoms, where not only was I having clicking and popping, but like my hip was giving out. And so I might sit for 5 minutes and do a scan a patient, and I'd get up into the patient room and I'd almost fall over because like my hip would give out or lock up on me. So that was no longer a sustainable way to. We got scoped, got taken care of. I feel good now. I'm glad I did it. If you had talked to me 2 months afterwards, I'd say, hell no, this is horrible. But a humbling experience, and I learned a lot. And what I really wanted to talk about, and what I started going down the rabbit hole, is the importance of preserving muscle mass and some of the strategies that I think that need to be employed. We know that when it comes to any type of surgery, people talk about techniques. What's the best approach to do some type of procedure? What medication should we be using? We're all focused on the actual thing, but what can you do before? What can you do after? Everything we've talked about this, right? And so the goal for most people, I think, after they have surgery is they want to be in less pain, but they really want to have better function. The problem is, depending on the intensity of the procedure, you're going to have some type of immobility. Something's going to be immobilized. You're going to have some precautions. You might not be weight bearing, as in my case, like it took me 6 weeks to fully weight bear without any crutches or assistive device. You're going to lose a lot. And you want to minimize the loss that you have of healthy lean tissue, right? So a lean body mass is basically anything but fat mass. The data is pretty clear on this. There is lots of literature. If you look at that, in general surgeries, within 48 hours of immobility, muscle atrophy begins, and in studies, thigh volume decreases by 1.7% after 2 days and up to 5.5% in 7 days. That's cross-sectional area. Not only does this affect your muscle mass, but these studies show this affects muscle strength. In orthopedic surgeries, and this is where like total knee replacements or total hip replacements, they see that in older adults, they have muscle atrophy in the quadriceps and hamstring muscles that can reach to up to 20%, 18 to 20% within 6 weeks. That's pretty profound, especially as you get up in the years. Like you can't afford to lose 20% of muscle mass in your thigh, right? Those are your locomotion stuff. That's going to help you get off the floor when you fall. Like there are implications to that in terms of how healthy you're going to be and the debility and sarcopenia down the road. And so, another study that I came across where they talked about individuals after, again, these hip replacements, during the first 2 weeks, they might lose up to 1% of muscle volume globally in the operated leg, right? So in the hip replacement they had. So all this to say is that we want to do everything possible to mitigate that. And nobody's talking about that. For instance, the standard, Darsh, that's been when somebody's having a surgical procedure, what did they say is NPO after
Midnight? Is that what you said?
Midnight. Yeah, after midnight. It doesn't. If your surgery is scheduled, sorry to ask you, put you on the spot there. But if your surgery is scheduled for 2 p.m. the next day, they'll say don't eat anything or drink anything after midnight. So yeah, okay. So you're going to do a 14-hour fast. Mm-hmm. Did you know that the guidelines say that's actually a bad idea?
I didn't realize
like
that.
Actual guidelines for nutritional and stuff. Yeah, they say actually you can have solid. If you're having a GI procedure, that's a different story. Mm-hmm. But any other procedure, and if you're having like an oncological procedure, they'll even advise you to eat up to 6 hours prior to the procedure. Solid food. You can drink, right? Clear liquids up to 2 hours prior to the procedure. So where this NPO after midnight comes from is it's absolutely asinine. And so not only does it, from a surgical perspective, but even after injuries, if you look at the data, and I'm going to link a couple of papers over the last couple of years that talk about how immobilization after surgeries, but even after acute injuries, you could have a fracture and stuff. You can have muscle atrophy. Not only do you have localized atrophy, but you also have systemic atrophy. And the reason for this is like these type of stressors, surgical procedures, big significant injuries, they put your body in this hypermetabolic, catabolic state. And that has hormonal implications, right? So you're going to have increased breakdown of muscle protein, so proteolysis. You'll have decreased muscle protein synthesis. We talked about how important that is for building muscle. That's going to get you to, you're going to be losing lean body mass. You're going to have increased cortisol, right? Which is going to be utilizing, you become insulin resistance, not only in that actual tissue that you're not using, but generally insulin resistance. And now you start shuttling, instead of into muscle, you're putting it into fat. And so that becomes really scary. Where it became problematic for me, and the reason I did that DEXA scan, is visually I could see myself being drastically different. So I had lost some weight, but I was like, man, it looks like I've lost so much muscle mass. And when I was out in California, I was like, I just want to go get this done. It turned out that I had lost 18 pounds of lean body mass in those 7 months, right? So I did it in March and then I did it in December, 18 pounds of lean body mass. But here's the worst news. I gained 12 pounds of fat mass.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was a really big wake up call for me is, okay, not only did I lose a lot of lean tissue, I also replaced it with unhealthy adipose tissue. Whereas like before I was very blessed to not have any visceral adipose tissue. And now I've got like 0.64 pounds of visceral adiposity that I need to take care of. So I got to really dial it in. So I'll pause there to see if you have any questions. If not, I mean, I can talk about some strategies to help mitigate, that muscle loss, because you got to hold on to it for dear life. Is what I've learned now from my personal anecdote.
I guess my question is, when we talk about that NPO, is there data to show that, like you said, the guidelines say you can even do up to 6 hours, but is there to show that, hey, if you actually hold it up to that 6 hours, you come out recovery-wise better or anything? As far as it just mainly that? Okay.
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? So because of the reasons that I mentioned to you, after that hypercatabolic state, you have insulin resistance. Actually, they'll recommend that. I think this comes from this paper where they have, let me see here. It's this paper that I have here that I pulled up. Let me pull up my new. Yeah, so this is the ESPEN Practical Guidelines from Clinical Nutrition in Surgery, right? So the Weinman 2021 paper where they talk about prolonged fasting discouraged and clear liquids are allowed up to 2 hours. And what they also even say is carbohydrate drinks. So leading up to the night before, you want to supplement with heavy carb drinks, and basically carb loading they're talking about the week leading up to surgery. 800 mLs the night before and 400 mLs 2 hours before surgery will help reduce insulin resistance and improve recovery in major surgeries, right? Wow. So if you're having a big hip surgery recovery, so like just getting good carbohydrate drink, could be a Gatorade, could be some version of that, right? Like you're actually, now you might come in a little hyperglycemic, but that's going to help reduce insulin. And again, your body's going to need all that energy and it's going to help recovery far better. So where this comes from, where you are about to go in a hypercatabolic state and we're putting you in a catabolic state of fasting for, and look, if a surgery is scheduled for 2, it might, by the time you come out, like depending on how long the procedure is, you're not eating till 4 or 5, depending on how long the surgery is, right? So like it's just piling on.
Yeah. And I wonder if that, the initial rule that I've always heard why it was NPO at midnight is in case the case gets pushed earlier, or if there's an emergency or something that they have to do, like, surgeons go in early morning. I've always heard it from that case, but nowadays, I mean, everything seems to be scheduled, time, especially with outpatient or something. So
I can tell you that that never happens. Cases don't get moved earlier; they get moved later.
Back,
because
right?
if it's an elective case, and an emergent case comes in, the elective case is getting bumped to the end of the day. You know,
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that's usually how it goes. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about obviously the only ones that you're planning for is elective case. But when you look at all these guidelines and you look at the different papers, and a couple of them that I think are really important for people to check out, they're talking about you have nutritional things that you can do. Every single one of them is talking about preoperative carbohydrate loading as much as 8 grams per kilograms per day for 3 to 4 days to reduce insulin resistance and improving recovery. They're talking about supplementing essential amino acids, whether you're getting it from whole foods or you're doing supplementation to reduce muscle atrophy. Creatine, we've talked about that, its role. That actually hasn't been as well studied for this specific thing. But another paper published in a spine journal that I came across when I was perusing through, I think it was published last year, where they looked at the combination of 10 grams of BCAAs as well as vitamin D, 2,000 IUs a day, helped people recover and lose less muscle mass over like an 8-week period postoperatively after spine surgery, right? Because with spine surgery, like you're losing core, you're going to be so immobile depending on what you're having. Mm-hmm. And so like there are a bunch of strategies, other nutrition stuff that I employed because I wanted to throw everything but the kitchen sink at it. Vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids. Something about omega-3 fatty acids, important to note is that early on, you want a little bit of inflammation, right? That inflammation is part of the healing cascade. Omega-3 fatty acids have a ton of benefits, but anti-inflammatory benefits are one of them. If you do that too early and you blunt the inflammatory response, you might actually compromise that. So you got to take that, for what it is. Same thing with like things like curcumin or other antioxidants, is you just have to be cautious with that. Part of my surgeon's protocol was to supplement with zinc and vitamin C for better wound healing. Okay. A month prior, I was taking 1 gram of vitamin C. He wanted me to do that. And so that I was really excited about that he had that. I remember my pre-op appointment where the internal medicine was like, okay, stop this medication. I was like, can I continue to take creatine? She said, no. I was like, yeah, I'm going to continue to take creatine. Yeah, I don't care what you say. Right. I wish I had known about this carb supplementation. I wish I had known about being able to eat, because my surgery was scheduled for 11:30. And by the time I ate something, it was like 3:30, 4. Yeah. So, really interesting stuff. Better prepared for next time if it happens. And this has actually made me think about how I'm going to suggest like my post-PRP protocols. That's the most intense procedure I do while I shut somebody down for a couple of days. I mean, I don't really do a lot of immobilization, but if you do like a lot of PRP in a rotator cuff tendon, that shoulder is going to be hurting for 4 or 5 days, or like an Achilles tendon or a big procedure like that. And if you put them in an ankle boot for 5-6 days, I might consider some supplementation. The one that I had never taken before that I tried, HMB. Have you heard of HMB?
I have not. HMB, no.
Yeah. So probably one thing I should say is, of all the ones, it should be lower on the list in terms of the return on investment and how much benefit that it might give.
What does it stand for?
But
HMB?
Protein supplementation, probably number one. Amino acid supplementation, carbohydrates, all those are going to be critical. HMB specifically, what's the full name for it? It's a metabolite within a breakdown amino acid of leucine. So leucine is a branch amino acid, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And it helps something.
Oh, beta, got it. Yeah. Beta hydroxy. What is it? Yeah.
Beta hydroxy
beta methyl butyrate.
Yeah. Beta methyl butyrate. Yeah. Very long name. But basically it's a metabolite of leucine, which helps promote protein synthesis and suppress muscle protein breakdown. So it makes it very beneficial for preserving muscle mass during periods of inactivity, like post-surgery, post-injury, and that kind of stuff. And so actually Transparent Labs, no affiliation whatsoever. They've got a good product where they've got a combination of creatine and HMB. And so I took that for about a month or so, and even put it in my PRP protocol when I had my cuff done not too long ago. That's when I took too.
Gotcha. Nice. Tell me a little bit about the physical activity that you did. So obviously your bilateral upper extremities were free to move. You didn't have any surgery there. So you were obviously able to put weight for the upper body. It was your right hip, right?
It was my right hip.
Your right hip. So the left was free too. Tell me a little bit about the data that you found about still using the left leg as well as just general principles.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I am of the people who probably needs to be pulled back, right? As many athletes are people who are driven to bounce back. And I needed somebody to pull me back, be like, it's okay, you're not going to lose, because I was freaking out about that. As early as, let's see, my surgery was on a Thursday. I think that Monday I was in the gym. Actually, one of my colleagues that I work with saw me in the gym, like all walking around on my crutches and my big hip brace and doing rows, like seated rows and stuff. I continued to train. So day 4, day 5 after I was doing upper body workouts, probably did it too soon. And the reason I say that is because, I don't know, hindsight's 2020, right? And I think my recovery was delayed a little bit, and it could have been because of all that core activation. So I think this is where like you can't be your own coach. Like you got to have somebody else to be like, okay, dial it back. But it's very clear, like we talked about the cross-training effect. If you have an injured extremity or an immobilized extremity and you train the contralateral extremity, the injured extremity is going to hold on to more muscle and more strength. So we continue training the left leg. I continue training the left leg. Dan Pope, previous guest, has a really awesome post-hip arthroscopy protocol. I think there's 2 podcasts that he has where he shows a case study of somebody he's training, and like a week after their hip surgery, that person's doing single leg RDLs with the other side. And you do it with some support. You can do single leg extensions, single leg curls. Like you continue training. Like I said, there is a localized atrophy and localized disuse atrophy you're going to get, and muscle loss. You can only do so much about that. That's where things like BFR, blood flow restriction training, tremendously helpful. But you have to minimize load. But the systemic loss, you got to do everything possible to prevent that. And that's where you continue training the other extremities. And the prehab is also critical. We didn't even talk about that, but like training to gain as much muscle before you go into surgery. So you can hold on to that.
Right. How long did it take for your right leg to match in size and maybe somewhat in strength?
It's probably not at size. Interestingly, I had a pelvic MRI, just so many injuries. When did I have this? Beginning of December, where the radiologist read that my left piriformis was hypertrophied, when in fact my right piriformis is probably atrophied.
Interesting.
So he thought that the left piriformis was hypertrophied with piriformis syndrome or something, but it's probably that my right side was atrophied, right? Because of the rotation and stuff. When that DEXA that I told you that I got in December, so about 7 months after, showed there was like a 1.1 pound difference in my right leg versus my left leg. So I'm still not nearly 8 months out. I'm curious, but I'm probably still not the same side to side.
Well, cool.
Yeah.
See, anything else you want to add that would be beneficial? I mean, I'm sure this topic and your learnings will come up in future episodes as well. So,
yeah. No, I would just, I think if we had to emphasize is just always question what you're being told. There's a way to go about that. If you feel like the clinician, the provider that you're working with isn't giving you good logic, good reason for doing something, and they're just saying, oh, we just do that. Like, for instance, we go back to the NPR rule when it's like, oh, don't eat anything after midnight. And they say, well, why can I not have anything? And they can't have a good answer for that. Then maybe we just question what that makes sense. And in this particular case, this is something you've always been taught. This is something I've always been taught. Hell, I even did it this time. Had I known this was when the nurse called me, I would be like, no, actually, that's going to compromise recovery. I'm not going to do that. And so I would just remember that nobody has more to lose with something than you. Yeah. So your health is in your own hands.
Yeah. I think, again, as we talk about trends and AI, I mean, everyone can do this now, right? I mean, you don't have to be an expert in research. I know you love to deep dive things that are pertinent to you. But for those that are like, man, where do I start? I mean, we listed some of those websites. Go in and just start searching and use AI to your benefit. And you'll be surprised by how much you can learn very, very quickly. So, cool. Awesome, man. Well, yeah, this was a really, really fun episode. Thanks for sharing your story. I learned a great deal too that I can't wait to actually utilize my patients. I mean, especially if they're coming post-surgical to the rehab hospital, I'm going to make sure they have vitamin C on, if it's beneficial and the risks aren't there. So there's certain things I'll take away for sure. So thanks, man.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll see you all next time then. All right, man. Have a good one.
All right, man.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Medicine Redefined. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to check out some of the additional resources in the show notes. Please also check out our social media platforms where you can find more content like this. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at MedRedefined.
We also want to thank our team for the production of this podcast, specifically Ethan Ju on video, Harita Yepuri on social media, Zainab Lugmani on research, and Sarah Khan for newsletter. Oh, and if you want to get similar bite-sized information delivered to your inbox every Sunday, please be sure to sign up for our newsletter. Also, if you enjoyed the show, please be sure to subscribe, review, and share with anyone who you think will gain value from this as well. Now, time for the ever so important disclaimers. This podcast is intended for general public use and is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute the practice of medicine, nor should be construed as medical advice. No physician-patient relationship is formed, and anything discussed in this podcast does not represent the views of our employers. We recommend that you seek the guidance of your personal physician regarding any specific health-related issues.